Okay, so let's unpack this. For years, it really felt like a tech unicorn, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
This mythical creature we'd probably never see.
Yeah.
A proper, you know, native Instagram app
hmm
built specifically for the iPad.
Yeah, optimized for the bigger screen, not just that zoomed in iPhone version we've all been stuck with for what, 15 years now?
15 years. And then almost out of nowhere, just days ago, the landscape kind of shifted,
It
right?
did. Meta finally released the official WhatsApp app for the iPad. I mean, people had been asking for that for, gosh, well over a decade.
Uh-huh.
And like, as soon as that happened, you could almost hear everyone thinking the same thing, turning their attention to the other big Meta app just glaringly missing from the
Yeah,
iPad.
Instagram, exactly. It was like, okay, great, WhatsApp is finally here.
Yeah.
But seriously, what about Instagram?
Yeah.
Well, it seems maybe, just maybe, the tech world is finally listening. And this deep dive, it's all about taking your source material, the articles, the research you've shared with us, and really cutting straight to the core.
Right.
We're going to confirm if this is actually happening, understand what the news is, and then, and this is maybe the most interesting part, explore why it took so incredibly long and critically why it seems to be finally happening now.
That's the mission. So let's just jump right in. First question, is the report true? Is a dedicated Instagram app for iPad actually in development?
According to the source material, yeah. Citing Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who's usually pretty plugged in his Power On newsletter, the answer is yes.
Okay.
A native Instagram app designed ground up for the iPad is reportedly in active development right now.
And we're talking active development, not just like a vague plan or some prototype gathering dust somewhere.
Not at all, apparently. The source is specific. Meta employees are actively testing the app internally. Development is even described as being full steam ahead.
Huh. Full steam ahead.
So yeah, this is reportedly a real ongoing project.
Okay. Full steam ahead sounds promising. Based on Gurman's reporting in the source, is there any expected timeline? When might we actually see this thing?
Well, the usual caveats apply, right? If everything goes smoothly, Gurman expects it to be released sometime this year, 2025.
This year. Wow. Just let that sink in for a second.
I got
For the entire life of the iPad, basically since 2010, the only Instagram we've had is the iPhone app, just blown up.
Right.
Not built for it, not optimized. Honestly, just a pretty crummy user experience on a bigger device.
Absolutely. It's been one of the most baffling absences on a major platform, hasn't it?
Definitely.
The burning question remains, why the 15-year wait? I mean, what possible reasons could be behind this almost unbelievable delay?
Well, the source points to a couple of potential factors, and one is particularly eye-raising. It touches on something that feels, well, less about tech strategy and maybe a bit more
Personal. Okay, tell us more about that angle. That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, the idea floated in the source is that maybe the consistent lack of native iPad app support across several Meta platforms, including Instagram, might have been, at least in part, a kind of deliberate slight.
A slight.
Almost like a way for Mark Zuckerberg to kind of push back against Apple and Tim Cook. You know, after various, let's call them skirmishes between the two tech giants over the years.
Ah, right. The simmering rivalry between Apple and Meta. That's always bubbling under the surface. What specific examples of these past tensions does the source highlight?
So two notable instances get mentioned. One is that widely reported comment Tim Cook made to Kara Swisher. This was during the fallout from the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Right, that massive data privacy mess for Facebook.
Exactly. So Swisher asked Cook, you know, what he would do if Apple found itself in that situation, this huge data crisis. And Cook reportedly replied, and this is a quote from the source, "I wouldn't be in this situation."
Oof. Yeah, I remember that.
That comment, basically implying Apple's business model wasn't reliant on user data in the same way, was reportedly taken quite personally by Zuckerberg.
Yeah, you can imagine. A not-so-subtle jab about core business models. What was the other example the source mentioned?
The source also brings up the whole Onavo hubbub. Remember that?
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
So Meta had this app, Onavo Protect. It was marketed as like a VPN and security tool, but it was also used to collect really detailed usage data from users, including data on competing apps. Apple basically said, nope, this violates our developer rules, which specifically banned apps collecting data on other apps without clear consent.
So Apple saw it as basically spying on users and competitors through this VPN app.
Pretty much, yeah. And Apple briefly and very publicly yanked Meta's ability to distribute internal company apps using its enterprise developer program because of it.
Right, that was a big deal.
So the source suggests these kinds of high-profile clashes could have contributed to a certain reluctance from Meta, maybe even from the top, to, heavily invest in optimizing for Apple's tablet platform. Like, why go the extra mile for them?
Okay, so on one hand, you've potentially got this corporate pride, maybe even personal friction playing a role. Was there also a more straightforward, technical reason given for the delay?
Yes, Gurman did point to a technical challenge as well, which makes sense too. Historically, a lot of pictures uploaded to Instagram were relatively low resolution.
Yeah, especially early on.
Exactly. And displaying those stretched out on a much larger iPad screen would make that low resolution, quote, more evident. It could potentially just make the content and therefore the app look bad.
Right. Degrade the user experience.
So there were likely some real technical considerations around just making the content look good and feel right on a bigger display.
Okay, that makes sense. You don't want your platform looking pixelated just because it's on a larger screen. But okay, technical hurdles, potential corporate cold wars, whatever the reasons were, something has clearly shifted fundamentally. After 15 years of holding out, why now? What's finally pushing Meta to prioritize this?
It seems like several factors are kind of converging now, and they mostly point towards, increasing external pressures and just evolving realities. First, and maybe simplest, the iPad user base itself. It's just grown significantly since the tablet first launched. It's a much, much larger potential audience than it was, say, 10 or even 5 years ago.
Right. More users mean more potential eyes on content and, let's be honest, ads.
Exactly. And then there's how people use Instagram itself. Has the platform evolved in a way that makes the iPad a more natural fit now?
That's a good point. How so?
Absolutely. The source really highlights this. Instagram's content formats have changed dramatically, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely.
We now see tons more high-resolution photos, widescreen videos, like Reels are huge. Even longer-form video content is popping up more.
Yeah.
And consuming all of that stuff is arguably a much better experience on a larger tablet screen than squished onto a phone, right?
For sure. Watching videos, browsing really visual feeds.
Yeah.
It's just more comfortable on a tablet.
So the platform's own evolution kind of aligns better now with what the iPad is good at. And then there's the elephant in the room, the competitive landscape.
Ah, yes, competition.
It's become incredibly intense. And the source notes that TikTok, which is obviously Instagram's main rival for attention, is available on the iPad. And it has a solid presence there.
So while Meta was, you could argue, effectively ignoring the iPad platform, a major competitor was actively building an audience there.
Precisely. And the source kind of suggests that while Meta might have held out some hope that the whole TikTok problem, the competitive threat might somehow resolve itself.
Yeah, maybe through regulatory action or legal stuff.
Right, but that seems increasingly unlikely now. So facing a major competitor who's already established on the platform puts real pressure on Meta to catch up, to be there too.
Okay, and you combine that competitive pressure with the fundamental business drivers.
Yeah, the source is pretty direct about this, with competition heating up and Meta, according to the source, potentially, quote, running out of options to increase revenue on its current user base just on existing platforms. Well, ignoring a growing platform like the iPad just isn't strategically smart anymore. An iPad app offers a whole new avenue for engagement, maybe longer session times, and therefore more chances for revenue.
Right, whether that's through advertising or maybe future e-commerce things that might even work better on a bigger screen.
Exactly. It's potentially a whole new growth area.
Okay, that paints a pretty clear picture then. So if we connect all these threads, you've got overcoming the technical issue with content resolution, adapting to how content and consumption have evolved on Instagram itself, facing down a major competitor like TikTok, who is on the iPad, and then just the undeniable business pressure to find new growth and revenue streams. It really sounds like these forces have finally reached a kind of tipping point where they outweigh any historical reluctance or maybe bruised egos or whatever might have caused the delay in the first place.
That's basically the synthesis the source presents. It looks like a combination of, let's say, technical readiness, market opportunity, competitive necessity, and sheer business imperatives have all converged. And that's what's pushed the project to full steam ahead with that expected release this year.
So after years and years of frustration for iPad users, dealing with that awkward scaled-up phone app, the Instagram app, built for the iPad, is reportedly, finally, actually coming.
Seems like it.
And this deep dive into your source material really shows us it probably wasn't just some random flip of a switch, or a sudden change of heart at Meta. It appears to be a pretty calculated, strategic response.
Right. Responding to how content has evolved, the sheer size of the iPad audience now, that very real competitive threat from rivals like TikTok who got there first.
And the fundamental business need for Meta to keep finding ways to engage users and ultimately generate revenue.
It really does seem like a decision driven by the realities of the market and competition finally becoming just too significant to ignore any longer.
So thinking about this whole saga, the 15-year delay, the potential reasons we talked about, from technical stuff to maybe alleged corporate pettiness, and then this list of factors finally driving the change now, especially competition and the need for new revenue. What is this decision to finally build a dedicated iPad app revealed to you about how big tech companies like Meta actually prioritize platform support? Does it show them, thoughtfully planning long-term, or is it more about primarily reacting when those external pressures and competitive threats just become too big to ignore? It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the complex forces at play behind the apps we use every single day?